Welcome to Method to the Meadness. I'm Burley Mullins, and boy, there are a lot of different types of mead. As I alluded to in that quick intro, there are a lot of different kinds of mead, and I thought I'd take the time to make a video going over a lot of the common different types of mead. This is not by any means an exhaustive list of the different mead varieties, and it is constantly changing as people start to put new different things in mead or prepare mead in different ways. There are new words created to describe them. And so what I'm going to do in this video is break it apart into 3 different categories of types of mead, where it is based on a couple of factors. The first category will be based on the strength of the mead and the different varieties in there, based on the method. Based on the method of the meads, and we'll get more into that later, and based on ingredients. So, as I mentioned in my What is Mead video, mead is any alcoholic beverage where 51% of the fermentable material is honey. 51% or more. There's one small exception to that, and we'll get there when we get there. So, let's get down to it. So, based on the strength of the mead, there is, starting with the weakest, would be hydromel. This is also, in some languages, is just the word for mead. Just to make things extra confusing. This basically refers to any mead that's between 3.5 and 7.5% alcohol. And so it's, typically a weak mead and can refer to any different variety of mead within that strength range. Then there's a type of mead that doesn't actually necessarily have a specified ABV range, but it's a session mead. And I did a video, which I will link right there, talking about session meads. They got their own video. It's a relatively new phenomenon in mead making. They tend to be canned meads, they tend to be sparkling, and they tend to be fairly accessibly priced and made available. Then there's a standard mead, what you can expect when you just grab a mead off the shelf that's not in a can and that is not specifically labeled otherwise. It should be 7.5 to 14% alcohol and can contain a number of other ingredients and have other methods. Then there's a sack mead or a great mead, which is defined nebulously between 14 and 18% alcohol, and it just means a very strong mead. There is I know I'm moving through these kind of quickly, but there's a lot to go through. There are dessert meads, which are just defined as being sweet and strong. They can go pretty high in alcohol content. In my cheap versus expensive mead video and the mead sour video, that I was using what I would absolutely consider a dessert mead. It was 19% alcohol, and it was very sweet. So sweet that I mostly made cocktails out of the rest of it. I did not drink it neat. And then there are fortified meads, which, just like fortified wines, have the fermentation ended early by adding some neutral grain spirit. They tend to be sweet, since the fermentation was ended not necessarily neutral grain spirit. Neutral spirit. Could be distilled from honey, could be distilled from other sources. To bump up the alcohol and fortify it. That's everything that I have on different mead varieties based solely on strength. Now, obviously, any mead in these categories can also fit into the next two categories, depending. So the next category of types of meads is that I'm going over is based on method. So these are where the method defines, the method of production defines how this mead is perceived and named primarily. Obviously, standard meads, honey, fruit, honey spices, honey, any other ingredient, fine, and just left as is to ferment. So the first one I want to talk about are bouchées. This is one of my favorite varieties of mead to make. I did one on the channel. It was the Star Wars mead, which I will again link right up there. And the difference in method for this one is when you caramelize the mead, when you caramelize the honey up to, even up to the point of scorching, to where it starts to smoke. It produces a rich toffee-like flavor in the final product. It adds depth. It can even add some smoke characteristics depending on how far you push that caramelization. There are short meads, which are meads that are brewed in such a way that are specifically meant to be consumed fairly quickly. Meads that don't require a lot of aging. This comes with the type of yeast you use, this comes with the ingredients you use, but it also is also dependent on method. There is also a long mead, also known as a great mead, which is predicated on aging fairly long times, including barrel aging your meads. And I would include barrel as method rather than an ingredient. And then there are sparkling meads, where during the production process, you, as I did in my red wall mead, the Cup of Cheer, which I will once again, it's going to be a lot of cards. Is there a limit to the number of cards? I'm going to find out if there's a limit to the number of cards. We'll find out together. That I did for the red wall mead. And that usually involves a secondary fermentation in the bottles, where you just add either both a little extra yeast and a little extra sugar, or just a little extra sugar, which can be enough to revive any residual yeast. It's kind of a gamble, though, if you don't have extra yeast. And then one that is separated by method post-production would be mulled mead. And a mulled mead is much like mulled wine, where you heat it up, add sugar, perhaps add a spirit, and add spices, and it's typically served hot. It was a fairly common holiday drink. I have actually never had mulled mead, something that I should do at some point. All right, moving on to the final and largest category is meads, mead varieties that are based on ingredients. And I'm gonna go just based on the order that I have it written down. It's not in any order. And there's even one with a subcategory, with subcategories and subcategories. You'll see when we get there. You know what? I'm gonna start there. This type of mead is called a melomel, or any mead made with fruits. It's a pretty broad category, and many of the fruits are used commonly enough that they have their own names within that category. So you have black meads, which are made with black currants, sizers, made with apples. I've had them in the channel before. Morats, made with mulberries. And it's either piment or piment, Pyment. It'll be on the screen. All of these will be. I've only read a lot of these words and not heard them spoken out loud. So my pronunciation, mileage may vary on these. And it's made with grapes, or grape juice, or wine must. And there are a couple of extra categories within this one, so we're going in pretty deep. Umphacamel, I think, is made with the juice and or fruits of unripe grapes. I can only imagine that this adds, a sour, acidic, or light element to it. It's not necessarily unpleasant. And then there's Hippocras, which is also a type of a preparation of wine. Tasting History did a video on Hippocras, and I will, if I haven't run out of cards to intersperse in here, link that right up there. You know the drill. And it is mead made both with grapes and spices, and in the context of it being a mead. Alright, that covers the mellow category. Moving on to acerglyn. One of those is probably right. And that is mead that includes maple syrup as well. I've brewed with maple syrup, just I haven't made a mead with maple syrup yet. And I bet it's delicious. Let's see, there are braggots. This is the special case that I was talking about earlier. Braggot, or bracket, depending on where you're from and what you prefer, refers to mead that is also made with grain. So you might call it a beer mead hybrid, and that is especially true because it refers to both a drink that is mostly mead that also has grain, or a beer that is mostly grain and also includes honey. So this is the one instance where it does not have to be 51% honey to have this name. You can actually find them fairly regularly. They might not even be labeled braggots because they're made by breweries usually. There just aren't that many meaderies pumping out braggots. For whatever reason or another. It just seems to be mostly breweries doing it. Then there are either capsicumel or capsimel, and that is referring to mead made with hot peppers. Not pepper, we'll get to that later, but specifically, spicy peppers, the fruits of the pepper plant. And those, I've actually made a couple, and I have tasted another couple of examples that I didn't make. And it's an experience. It's really good. It can be done deftly, and it can be done with a punch. And in both cases, the experience can be very enjoyable. Next is a category that I am surprised does not have a ton of subcategories, or does not have a ton of commonly used subcategories for it. And that's metheglin, which used to refer to just meads in general, and may, and the editor, me, will probably correct me if this is incorrect. I will do a little bit more research to confirm. Maybe some of the etymological roots of the words for medicine and things like that. And that is mead made with spices and herbs. And it's a very broad category, and I'm just shocked that more common spices and more common herbs don't have their own categories, as far as I can tell, like they do with melomels. But, as I said at the beginning of this episode, the language itself is evolving. If a whole bunch of people decide that, cinnamon meads are casumels, it becomes a thing. It's just based on what everyone agrees is correct. And then the next category I have is oxymels, which are meads made with wine vinegars in the mead. I have to assume that this either has to be very well filtered vinegar or mead that is meant to be consumed pretty quickly. Because if there's any vinegar mother left in that wine vinegar, when it gets mixed into the mead, it will turn the whole mead into vinegar. Especially if there's a lot of air left in the bottle as well. I bet mead vinegar is delicious, but if you want that alcohol, seems to be a bit, risky, in my opinion. Then there are show meads, which, despite the name, which may lead you to believe that they're flashy with a whole bunch of different ingredients mixed together, is plain mead. It's mead that is intended to show the quality of the honey, the quality of the yeast, and the quality of the water. And I do mean the quality of the water. Anyone who's talked to you about New York bagels will know what I'm talking about. And then finally, the last mead that I have on my list, and again, like I said, this is not nearly an exhaustive list. There are so many varieties and sub-varieties that I could have gone into. These are just the ones that kept popping up in lists and seem to be in relatively common use. And that's rhodomel, which I believe has Roman roots and refers to rose petal infused mead. Which sounds lovely. Anyone who's worked with rose or rose water knows that it's easy to, go a bit too heavy-handed with it, but, it'd be interesting to try that out myself. I've used flowers in mead before, actually it's in secondary fermentation right now, which depending on the orders, the order that these videos go out, may give things away, but it's the Valheim mead that I've already done a couple of episodes on this channel, so I'm not giving too much away, but it involves dandelion flowers. There's not a specific word for that. Of course, that mead would cover a number of varieties that I've gone over here. And that is the varieties of mead that I have chosen to cover on this. Some were left out, some were put in that maybe don't deserve a spot on this list. Did I miss one that you particularly enjoy? Put it in the comments below. I do love engaging with my viewers. But no, I really do appreciate my viewers and the people who engage in the comments. This video was actually inspired by a comment somebody left on one of my other videos, where we briefly went over some of the differences in meads. So it really means a lot, guys. Guys, gals, and everyone else. So if you could like, comment, subscribe, make the algorithm gods happy, and maybe share these videos with anyone who might be interested. It's currently the best way you can support the channel. Until next time, I've been Burley Mullins, and this is Method to the Meadness.